It's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Hi everyone, so we're back with you mid-fog of the long game week 21. Initially thought we'd have a week off, but Sam's back from skiing in one piece, and there have been enough developments, I think, to make us think it's worth a pod. Plus, we've got an evergreen topic on the table for contemplate. I'm Tom, I'm here with a beer. I enjoyed, not too much of a rush, I suppose, to think about my team in between sort of game weeks. It's kind of, you're still in the middle of one, which is a bit of a strange place to be. But hey, here we are, and yes, we'll still have a lot to go through, I'm sure, today. Joined by Sam, fresh from his winter break, sort of. A bit of coughing, I've been told, may occur during the muted period. But yeah, been off skiing, all good. No broken bones or anything.
Yeah, survived. I'm still in one piece, although after a week of a bit of skiing, bit of drinking, and then back to work today, I'm feeling a little bit run down. So apologies in advance if I don't mute my microphone in time for any coughing that occurs. But it's not been too bad. I've survived work and got through it all without coughing on camera too much. So it should hopefully be fine. I was buoyed, of course, whilst out skiing by the news of Cole Palmer returning as my captain. So at least that gave me some encouragement. And I did, luckily enough, get to catch most of the live games as well, because there was a 2-hour difference. So by the time the matches were on, most of my skiing was out of the way anyway. So most of the matches I've actually been kept fairly up to date with. So that was quite a pleasant surprise. In the meantime, though, before we get on to the matches specifically, we are Who Got the Assist. On today's pod, we're having a bit of a general catch up on news that's broken since we last podded, which turns out is quite a lot. I don't think we expected there to be much, but as it happened, pretty much from the second I got on the plane, all these manner of things kicked off. So it's probably worth discussing a few of those. Our contemplate debate today will be on planning in FPL these days, prompted by a few discussions we've had recently, where we seem to be coming down on slightly opposing sides, myself and Tom. So it should be an interesting discussion there. And of course, we'll have the listener Q&A this week as well. We're going to miss out on bold claims for now, as that will be better placed in the next episode anyway. In the meantime, though, it's January the 15th. So the first block of games, so the first 5 have gotten out of the way. I think most of us have had 50 or 60% of our players play as well, so it's very much at the halfway point. The second half is to come next weekend, but like I said, there's a lot to catch up on anyway, so we thought we'd pod in the meantime.
Nice one. Should we just do a quick kind of halfway house update for everybody? I'm first up, aren't I? So yeah, 28 points for me. I just elected to make the one move in the end. So lots of stuff was kind of swirling around my head on the last pod we did with Dan. Lots of things I could have possibly done. Was about taking a hit to do X, Y, and Z. But in the end, because obviously Trent then went off and got injured, and Bowen was suddenly off the table as well after the FA Cup game against Bristol City, it just lent itself to avoiding the hit, and that being sort of the key differential this week. So out went Son, in came Saka, got a 0.1 or it's 0.2 price swing there, isn't it? If you buy a player who rises and sell a player who falls. So that happened, which was good. And then I kind of left it and just hoped that I'd get an 11 out. And so far it's been going all right. Obviously didn't go with Palmer, so went with Saka as the captain. If you're watching at least, it's obvious. But yeah, last week I was talking about Palmer and going to go for him, but I kind of decided that I'd just go with Saka in the end and kind of back the hopium and a little bit of time off. And Mikel getting his vacuum cleaner out, one for those listening to last pod, is going to reinvigorate us as a team. So I'm on 28 at the moment. A slight red arrow. It's like the safety score is 29. I'm on 28. I've got the Palmer goal, but obviously that's kind of irrelevant. I think it's like 100 and both Saka and Palmer both came out about 106-ish EO, so it's a slight sort of hit for me on him. Gordon, who I didn't, so if I'd done another move, I'd have had to bench Gordon, so I was quite pleased that I played him, and then of course he scored. Wasn't very far off getting bonus as well. Pedro Porro with an assist and a couple of bonus and 2-2, getting 2 goals, so getting bonus is good. And then elsewhere, Watkins blank, but who cares? Is that effectively you've kind of 100% owned anyway. And then Leno failed to save Cole Palmer's penalty and did nothing else as per for him. So yes, 28 at the moment. I've got 2 defenders, Saliba and White, Saka the captain, and Slanky and Darwin still to play. So we shall see how we go. Maybe I'll get a green arrow here. I think just avoiding the hit probably may just see me inch one, but we will see come next weekend. And you, Sam, you're probably doing a little bit better just because you've got Cole Palmer with the armband.
Yeah, slightly better. So Cole Palmer did get me off to a good start, 20 points from him. Blanks elsewhere in a lot of my team, though. So Foden and Garnacho were my two midfield transfers in. Both of them blanked, although I feel quite hard done by, especially in Garnacho's case. The hit was taken as well. So I brought in Estupinian, who hasn't played so far. And those of you who are watching the stream can see that Gordon is sat first on my bench with 7 points. Either way, I'm pretty happy with the result there because I have kept Trent Alexander-Arnold and I've started him just in case he is fit. It does look very, very unlikely he will be, but I just thought on the off chance that he does recover in time, then having him as a starter away at Bournemouth wasn't a bad shout. So I've kept hold of him. I fully expect Gordon to come in and that would take me up to 40 points with the -4 hit, of course, down to 36. If not, then I still fairly happy with Trent playing against Bournemouth and hopefully he can match, if not better, Gordon's points as well. So not a bad situation to be in there. Little bit disappointed that more of my starting 11 in the first half of the game week didn't return, but it has been enough so far for a very, very slight green arrow of about 2k so far. So not much difference whatsoever. Very much up in the air as to whether either of us will secure a green arrow as it stands. I think we're both pretty much level pegging. I think there's 1 point in it with the hit taken into account. So yeah, I think with that, we can probably move on to the main topics this week.
Yeah, so first thing I suppose is just the general updates, as Sam mentioned, and just kind of our views, our takes, our reactions to this sort of all this sort of palaver. The first one, a big man on the screen, Erling Haaland, not back until February was the last update. Had a bit of a setback according to one of the ITKs. So it may well be that there's one extra week of no Haaland in game week 22, which is, I guess, the time it's fair to say, Sam, that most of us were looking to be bringing him back in. So I think there's definitely been an impact on planning, which we're going to speak about in a little bit, and also the potential captaincy for next week. We can bring that whole discussion kind of right up to the front of the pod, actually, just because I think that we all had that game ringed, circled, double underlined, highlighted as being like, this is Haaland, straight back into my team, straight with the captain's armband back on him where it belongs, arguably. But now I think there's definitely potentially a reordering maybe of our planning, and certainly another week like this week just gone where we'll be looking around a bit more, wondering where the captaincy armband is going to lie. I think that certainly did happen last week, and I think that's been evidenced by Palmer and Saka both kind of having similar EOs and they're not being a particular standout this time round. Do you think that's going to happen next week, and how has that impacted your plans overall? No Haaland.
Yeah, so I'm not so confident that he's definitely not back for Burnley, but I think with that in mind, it's definitely worth noting that it is very much up in the air and there's probably a very good chance that he isn't going to be back in time for that. And then, of course, the next game week after that is pretty close following. So he could even be out for game week 23 as well if things go against him. So you definitely need to have a plan in place for if we don't receive any surprising positive news that Haaland has recovered slightly ahead of schedule. But yeah, I think we have to plan for that maneuver without him for the time being. And it is a shame because Burnley at home would have been the perfect opportunity. I intentionally made certain transfers this week and indeed in previous weeks as well to make it very easy for me to get back to Haaland without the hit and still have some money spare to help me get back to Salah, for example, in a few game weeks time when he's back. So it is a bit frustrating that news might potentially be negative, but it also leaves us open to other opportunities. And the fact that there are going to be a fairly decent number of captain options this week, and the crowd again will be fairly split like it was this week, again paves the way for opportunity. And of course, there is another City player that is just about premium that maybe some people are getting more and more tempted to bring in ASAP based on recent performances as well. So Haaland might not be the only player against Burnley this week that the armband could be seen on.
Yeah, so Kay asked us, have I missed the boat on Foden? There's over 1 million transfers in, I think. I'm pretty sure that's true. I'm not very good with my zeros, as you know, Sam. But I'm pretty sure there's quite a few transfers in for Foden. Yeah, no, actually, I think
over the last 2, but like before the deadline as well.
Over the last kind of few weeks, there's been quite a lot of movement towards him. Over 500. 55,000 people have brought him in right now, as opposed to 500,000 people have brought in Kevin De Bruyne. We'll speak about in a minute. But yeah, I mean, there's both of them. Potentially, I suppose, are going to represent kind of the next best captaincy, as well as obviously Alvarez, who's sat in many a squad out there. And I suppose against Burnley, it is the kind of game where we, as non-Alvarez owners, are going to be very fearful of that. And as current Foden owners, we're both going to probably be looking at kind of putting a captaincy armband on him, because I mean, there are certainly options out there. The thing is that if you look around, kind of the I guess depleted squad format we're all kind of in the moment, without Salah, without Son, who would have been kind of where we default to as vice kind of captains if Salah wasn't around. Sorry, if Haaland wasn't around. I just don't really. Apart from Arsenal versus Nottingham Forest, where maybe you look at Saka, depending on how he does against Crystal Palace this weekend coming up. Other than that, I look around and think, I don't know, Watkins versus Newcastle, he might be a player that you'd be thinking about if they had a better fixture, but it doesn't look like it. We all went there against Sheffield United, for example. Spurs versus Brentford, well, I mean, if you've got Richarlison, maybe we're looking at that. Liverpool versus Chelsea, I don't think there's going to be a Palmer sort of redux there. West Ham versus Bournemouth on the 1st of February, so that might be kind of where people are tempted to go with a Bowen, for example. But I do think that kind of City versus Burnley is the standout, and I kind of feel like, yes, okay, we all wanted to captain Haaland, but I feel like we'll just kind of shove it on Foden and see what happens, unless there's a temptation to bring in one of KDB. So Merck Johnson in the chat just said he wants KDB too, or there's a temptation, both of us as Darwin owners as well, to bring in Alvarez, maybe even just a 1 week punt. I mean, it's not unprecedented to do that kind of thing, and in a game like that, maybe there is, I guess, a justification to do it and then take the points and move them on to Haaland as soon as Haaland's back fit, if that does happen. Because obviously, remember that the next week is a weird one as well. We're kind of a bit of a strange period. So game week 22 is Tuesday till Thursday, isn't it? I think it is. And then kind of we hit back kind of to regular scheduling in game week 23, which is kind of starts again literally the Saturday after. So it's a very congested little schedule that we've got again. So it would be kind of literally hoping that in that City game, which is the second day as well, so I don't know whether we get any kind of leakage beforehand. I guess kind of just doubling up and hoping for the best with a De Bruyne and or an Alvarez or something like that. I mean, any consideration straight off the bat of looking at Alvarez, because it's certainly something that I've been kind of thinking about, obviously depending on what the hell happens over the next few weeks. I'm not one of these people who 500,000 people buying De Bruyne. It just blows my mind, but hey, there you go. Any consideration for that doubling up?
So yeah, I mean, you mentioned it to me earlier today on WhatsApp, and at that point I hadn't even considered it. And from the second you mentioned it, I started looking at the next few weeks planning for my side, and it actually does make quite a lot of sense to move that element early, and then it is basically just a 1 week punt or a punt for as long as Haaland ends up being out for. And it also solves the problem of City coverage for the double in case for some reason Haaland's setback is even longer than we could possibly imagine at this point. So it does kind of solve a couple of issues in one with Alvarez, and it makes a lot of sense if we do get negative news about Haaland and we know for sure he's not going to play that Burnley game. Burnley do leave a lot of spaces in that central area. So if Alvarez is taking Haaland's slot there for another game week, he could and should benefit quite a lot from the style of football that Burnley play. Now, that's also relevant to Foden as well. If he plays centrally in that pocket, then he could easily benefit from it as well. So there'll be definite debate about which of those two would be easier to put the armband on. But then, of course, we've also got the most popular transfer in this week being KDB. And I think it is at least worth a discussion to figure out whether or not he is trustworthy enough that even without the X minutes being heavily in his favour, he's explosive and he can still return against Burnley. And whilst I'm definitely not going to be making an early transfer on KDB. I do still see the appeal, and I can understand why some people are going to, because he could easily get 2, maybe even 3 price rises this game week. So I do understand the logic.
Certainly. So Jimmy the Claret asked us, KDB is literally telling us that he won't play 90 minutes every week, but he can't return well enough in those 20, 30 minutes like he did the week just gone to make him a punt, surely, right? You sure? Yeah, I think definitely worth a discussion, especially the money we've got sloshing around at the moment. It could be kind of one of those sort of unique opportunities to bring the player in and enjoy kind of maybe 1, maybe 2 weeks. It's still a little while, isn't it, until City are engaged in anything beyond the Premier League, but the FA Cup aside, I'm sure that they're going to be sparing with a lot of their kind of key players are. So I don't know. I can definitely see it. I don't really know how I do it. In fact, I do, because I've still got Salah. So if I'm not buying, if I'm not buying Haaland immediately this week, I could really think about it. The thing is that I feel like I'd kind of want to use. Eventually, I'm going to want to get Haaland back. And I don't know whether I'd kind of want to be stuck in the scenario where I'm going to have to make another transfer to get rid of KDB for Haaland, but I could certainly do it and then bench, I don't know, a Palmer or a Gordon this week to make it happen. It's not beyond the realms of possibility, that's for sure. In terms of the fitness point, and he's saying he doesn't feel like he's kind of requisite fitness. There's certainly something to bear in mind. We'll have the FA Cup obviously to see what happens there as well. I don't think I'd ever want to be in the scenario where I'm looking at minutes for any Man City player and playing the whole, he played in this game, therefore he's probably not going to play in that game sort of thing. But, they've got the break now as well, the winter break to enjoy. So who knows what's going to manifest over that time. And obviously we've been speaking a little bit about Foden, his potential role in the team, how that's going to morph and evolve with KDB, the different ways that KDB could be deployed. Like we've gone from theories surrounding that Foden's going to be shunted out to the wing all the way through to theories that KDB is going to start being utilised in the Gundogan role a little bit more. I mean, a 20-minute, 30-minute cameo, you can't really tell how those two assets are going to interact. But I think it'd be really interesting to see, and hopefully we'll get some sort of clue from the FA Cup fixture. Certainly on the table, especially because that game is against Spurs. I think it's like a game where they are almost definitely going to. No, I said earlier that okay, we're not going to pay it too much heat. They will, I suppose, in that scenario when it is a bigger game. So yeah, I mean, it's all about information, I guess, again. And that game is luckily just before the deadline for game week 22 as well, during that weekend. So hopefully we'll get some information there. I suspect we'll see a lot of people flocking to KDB over this kind of period just because he's rising in price. The behavioral cycle is always, I kind of like this player, he's just scored loads of points, I'll look at what's going on, those people are buying him, he must be good, I'm going to buy him as well. And so it kind of perpetuates. Wouldn't be surprised if he kind of takes 0.2 0.3 rise over this time frame. Could be one to certainly think about. I don't know. I just don't know. I kind of prefer, like you were saying, Sam, yes, okay, there's going to be a lot of space for KDB to do his thing, depending on how he and Foden are deployed. But you've still got to be looking at Alvarez really as being sort of the main sort of goal scorer, I suppose, in that scenario. So I think him in for Darwin for 1 week does feel like something I prefer to do and kind of keep the kind of the squad shape that I've got rather than kind of complicating it a little bit more. But I mean, that's one to kind of put on the back burner, that's for sure. Any interest for you in KDB?
Yeah, I think for me, it might be slightly more tricky. Obviously, I've got the budget to do so, but I've still got a midfield 5 I'm pretty happy with. One of the players is now Garnacho, who is obviously very cheap. I'm not getting rid of Palmer or Gordon just yet either. And Saka away at Forest is hard to get rid of. Obviously, I'm not getting rid of Foden against Burnley either. So for me, it's quite difficult to make that move. And then, of course, whichever one of those players I was to get rid of, then I'm committing quite a lot of money to bringing in a player that I've not got full faith in minutes, not necessarily just for Burnley, but moving forwards as well. A big draw for bringing in a Man City player will be that double game week. And can we really say for certain that he's going to have recovered his fitness well enough that he'll be a guaranteed starter for both of those double game week games, when they've also got other fixtures to play around. Then it's a very tight schedule around that point for them. So I think, again, he's such an explosive player. We've seen what he can do even against very good opposition in 20 or 30 minutes. But that isn't the only game we've got to go on. We've got years and years of data on KDB. He doesn't return in every single match he plays. There will be the odd blank, and 20 or 30 minutes isn't enough to guarantee him points every single week, as tempting as it might be to think so based on what we've just seen him do. He is, of course, a world-class player, but even world-class players regularly need 90 minutes to consistently get returns that are worthy of an FPL pick for us. Obviously, he's a great player, obviously, but I think in my team, in my structure, for example, it's quite tough for me to condone bringing him in, because it would break apart a lot of things and prevent other future moves from being made. And I'm pretty happy with the structure I've got already. So probably a player that I'll sadly be very jealous of for game week 22. But also, I think it's probably for the best in my particular scenario.
I feel you. I'm probably the same. I do think that game in itself is puntable, but I kind of feel like I disentangle the two. Like, yes, okay, they've got double game coming up, which I was going to come on to anyway, so I'm glad you brought it up. And you've also got that one game, which is really, really enticing for a potentially big score. So I think it would be the case that I'd be looking at that game as a 1 week punt, whether it was KDB, whether it was an Alvarez, and it's about weighing up, as you said, like what that does to your onward plan.
Yeah.
If you do, like in the ideal scenario, yes, okay, you buy a KDB, you buy an Alvarez, they go off in that game, and you bank the point, say thank you very much, I'm going to take a hit now to move this on effectively, because I think that's kind of what you're going to be doing. And we've also then got the situation later on down the line for the double game week, where you have to decide kind of how you're going to be tooling up your City players from that point. Because yes, you've got if you buy Alvarez back, I think it would be kind of with your eyes wide open. It would be kind of a short-term punt, effectively. You'd be looking to replace him with Haaland, basically, because you've got around the double game week. They've got the Chelsea game on the 17th, then they've got Brentford on the 20th, Bournemouth on the 24th, and the Manchester derby on the 2nd of March. Before the Chelsea game, there's also the UEFA Champions League kicks off again, so around the 16th. So there's a lot there, and I don't really, I've always kind of felt a bit cynical, I guess, about anyone who's able to kind of sit there and kind of say, okay, well, he hasn't played this game, so he'll definitely play the next, or he'll definitely play all the games apart from for Haaland. He's been the one kind of, I guess, exemption to the Pep rule about a particular player. So it would really be kind of, I don't want to get into kind of who's going to be playing what during the double yet. But it would be very much about, for me, just thinking, right, that Burnley game, I'm going to take that, play that game in front of me, and then see what happens afterwards. If I did go for that short term sort of punt on the one individual. It's very dicey, isn't it? So yeah, the City Brentford double has been confirmed. That was on a bit of news that has erupted since we last spoke. City on to game 25 have got Chelsea and Brentford at home, and Brentford have got Liverpool at home and Man City away. So yes, definitely a couple of fixtures for both teams that don't look particularly alluring, I'm going to say, just because, I mean, you could be looking at City and thinking, oh yeah, the Brentford game's really good, but Brentford's done really well against City over the last few years. And as we picked out on the pod last week, or the week before, actually, during the FA Cup, and they're fourth for XGC at the moment, as in fourth best for XGC at the moment. So it's not going to be a walkover. And the Chelsea game, yeah, okay, maybe you'll be looking at that one and thinking, that would be kind of quite good. But I don't know, it kind of feels like a kind of a pair of fixtures for City, at least, where I don't know whether I'm going to be kind of lumping in more than maybe Foden and Haaland. I think I'm just going to leave Foden there now and hope for the best. But yeah, I don't know whether the triple captaincy will be played. I'm sure it probably will be, to be honest. It kind of feels like that's the way it's going. I haven't thought about it too much, which again, we'll come on to in just a second in terms of planning. And the Brentford, Liverpool Man City, that kind of feels to me a little bit like it's just Tony or bust, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we've got a little while to go, haven't we, before that sort of happens? But I mean, initial thoughts, has the triple captaincy come into your head for that period of games?
It has. Initially, I thought I was going to line up more towards a free hit for 25 rather than anything else. But the way that the injuries more than anything else have shaped up in the recent week has led me down a path where Foden has become more of an option. So I'm actually building more towards not needing to free hit in 25. And because I've got more exposure on Man City, I might not need to do it in 26 either, especially if I don't pile all in on Liverpool as well. So, yeah, I think triple captain certainly does come onto the menu for 25, not necessarily for a Man City player either, because Liverpool are still fairly likely to double in that game week as it stands as well. So I think it is worth noting that if they were to double, they have a fantastic pairing. Luton's one of them. I can't remember who else it is in that game week, but it is a nice looking double. It will be the game that they've already got scheduled in 25 that matches up for it. So if Salah is back, which at the moment it is looking
it's Brentford as well.
Right, that's it. Of course it is. Of course it is. And that's a very nice looking double. So you could potentially be looking at Salah as your triple captaincy there as well. Now, on that note, if Liverpool were to get a double game week and Salah's back, Trent's back, then having KDB is probably quite a difficult task to accomplish if you're going to have Haaland as well. That is a lot of money to be spending on purely Man City and Liverpool players. And you're going to need a lot of very bargain basement players to make that work. I'm not even sure that I could make that work with all four of them. So Trent, KDB, Salah and Haaland. And Salah and Haaland are the two first ones you would want in game week 25. I think those are the ones that you would break apart your team to make sure you did have if Liverpool do get the double. And so KDB probably naturally becomes the scapegoat for Salah anyway, which is another reason that would make me doubt bringing in KDB for now anyway, because you might well be looking at selling him ahead of a double game week, which would be very, very conflicting and probably give you food for thought whether you or not you want to bother. But then you'd be hanging on to a player that might be a minute's risk against a player that is arguably the best triple captain we're going to have all season in Mo Salah. So it's quite a difficult complex to get your head around right now. And I'd prefer maybe to just not put myself in that position and maybe just avoid KDB for that reason for the time being.
Yeah, I feel you. It's one of those that I haven't really paid much heed to yet, and we'll speak about that in just a moment. The other thing, just to mention, is obviously Trent and Bowen, like I mentioned earlier on. So last week I was in a quandary because I was thinking, well, how do I get Trent, Saka, and maybe Haaland back? And it was really interesting to see the dominoes fall. Trent falling out. I was really worried about Bowen, and it sounds like from a journalist from a dodgy source tonight, at least, that Bowen may be back for Sheffield United. You said you played Trent, and there's definitely some rumblings in very dodgy circles again, that he may be back for Bournemouth, but it's a hyperextended knee. I seem to remember that Zlatan got one of those a few years ago and then ended up being out for quite a few weeks. So interesting to see what happens there. Yeah, I think that's one that we need to we'll kind of comment on next week. To me, Sam, just because it's all up in the air, isn't it, in terms of what happens next? And obviously, we've got to wait for news on more doubles from the FA Cup replays, etc. I think there's still kind of there's still the Bournemouth Luton game kind of floating around, ready to go in somewhere else, and maybe we Dom Solanke, who becomes your triple captain anyway. But yeah, I think it's definitely interesting to keep an eye on. And my feeling might be that you're right, that maybe we'd see what happens with Salah if he is the one who's back. Nick's just said in the chat, there's not that many City players that will play twice in the double. He thinks the KDB probably won't play twice, neither will Haaland, neither will Foden. And I can definitely see that eventuality where you'll kind of have, the X-Mins will be around sort of 120 for all the players. And it'll be really interesting to kind of have the scenario where we're playing sort of reluctant triple captains, so see how that develops, I guess, over time.
That's why I'm more tempted to put the triple captain on Salah if Liverpool do get the double as well. I'd still want the Man City players, because even if they get 100 to 120 minutes, that's a Man City player with two fixtures and at least appearance points in both. even if they come off the bench for a little bit. But yeah, KDB certainly. I'm not sure I agree so much on Haaland and Foden. I think Foden's pretty integral, but and is very good on the X minutes at the moment, but he might get an early sub. He might get benched and come on for 30, maybe 40 in another. And Haaland, I think it entirely depends how soon we see him again. I think if we see him in game week 22 or game week 23, there's a decent chance that he does start both in 25. But if we get to something like 24 and he's still sitting on the bench or he's not back, then I think that's a very safe bet to make that he won't play both at the very least. So yeah, definitely one to keep an eye on for now. And I don't necessarily disagree with what Nick said at all.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on then. I think we're kind of touching on it quite a bit to kind of what we were kind of saying we're going to speak about. It's just planning in FPL, a bit of an evergreen topic because we're on a week where it's difficult to talk too much about what our plans are going forward, etc., etc. Where we've done that a little bit, but we're not able to talk about our plans immediately because there's so much information to come. But it felt worth a discussion to me because we obviously talk regularly, you and I, Sam, about plans for our team and how we're planning to move for the weeks ahead. But I think, we've both noticed that this has come, a big difference between us has come into acute focus with the doubles that come up, chip season approaching, and how we kind of approach things, I suppose. And I think that you're pretty keen to be across all the upcoming developments and you've got a plan in place for eventualities, you've got your sexy spreadsheet, all these kinds of things. Whereas I feel like I've now gone the other way and I'm happy to be quite laissez-faire when it comes to FPL and FPL planning, and I kind of cross bridges when I arrive at them now, whereas I used to kind of be a bit more like you. So I think it was worth kind of just having a quick discussion slash debate on this, and I can't work out contemplate wise, Sam, which way round it is, because I, in my mind, the pro template for engaged players is probably you, like wanting to get ahead, wanting to kind of consume all the information, go off and make your own plans. Whereas for me, I guess I'm the contemplate, whereas I just want to play the game in front of me and kind of see what happens. Also known as don't get off your ass until you absolutely have to. do you think that's right? Or is it the other way around? More people are sort of, take it as it comes, like I am sort of more these days? Or do you think more people are in your boat? It's quite difficult, isn't it? I guess it depends on the manager type.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think more often than not, the people that probably are listening to this type of show and engaging in FPL content probably more often fall on the side of planning and trying to get as much information as possible before making a decision. But there's a wide range of what that actually means. I would still put you within that category. But again, it's probably you're at a slightly lower end of that category, whereas there are managers out there who want all of the information laid out right in front of them months and months in advance. They're working out percentages of probability for different double game weeks going in and how many blanks are we expecting in game week 29, for instance. Now, I love that part of it. I love nerding out to those probabilities and trying to figure out different outcomes. At this point, it is worth saying that it's still so up in the air as far away as game week 29 that it is almost pointless doing so. But I do still find it quite interesting to figure out, in that eventuality, how would I try and react? Would I need to be using my free hit, or would I need to try and plan when I'm going to wildcard around those different probabilities, for example? But I think generally the people that listen to this sort of content and engage regularly probably fall more often than not on the pro template, which is more strategy and more planning is better. But it's definitely not a black and white thing. There's definitely a big grey area in between.
Yeah, no, I think you're probably right. I do think though, when I look at it, so in the past, I like when you speak about kind of what you're doing and how you're sort of thinking about the game, as it were, or your plans going forward. Like I definitely used to be more like you. And like I remember having my own like living document, like a large spreadsheet which kept track of stuff. I used to kind of keep track of all of these players who were kind of coming to the fore, like the fixtures going forward. I know that Ben Crellin and Jossie both have their own sort of team planner sort of things going on. But I suppose over time, with the volatility when it comes to FPL and all of these sort of little events which have happened, I suppose obviously definitely there's some mitigation in terms of external shocks. So the pandemic, Queen dying, all these sorts of little things that have popped up the last few years. That sort of volatility when it comes to FPL has made me kind of I guess, realize, from my perspective at least, that the effort you put in doesn't often evince the reward, because things change so much. Like, the dynamic, I guess, in terms of planning is whether it's a help or a hindrance. And I suppose I don't know. I'm happy to be kind of spoken differently, proved wrong, or kind of talked into thinking about it differently. But I have become convinced that over planning of a sort, obviously, I still kind of have an idea of what I'm going to do, but it's kind of quite a vague and formless one, as it was before. So I'm kind of at the moment in the camp where planning kind of feels a bit of a hindrance more than anything. And I suppose there's a psychological kind of bit behind it as well, which is kind of the sunk cost for me, because I often kind of, I used to, and especially this is kind of why my finishes in the past over the last 3 years in WGTA have been so bad, because I kind of put in so much effort into this game, right? And it's not really a game oftentimes that actually rewards that effort.
Yeah.
It kind of rewards people who get very lucky. And I suppose the blowback, the sting of that, has been that I've kind of become more like those people who got lucky, effectively. And I don't want to kind of sunk cost myself into wanting to stick to a plan, because I put loads of kind of thought into it, wanting to spend loads of time on something, only to see that kind of all that planning kind of goes to waste. And there's a few examples I've kind of got off the top of my head. So obviously, the really kind of near term one is Haaland continuing to be injured, and kind of what's happened with Trent being kind of potentially out and things like that. There's the example of a couple of years back of the Leeds double game week, which never was. Do you remember that one? So I think like Shrewsbury or something wouldn't change their fixture or something like that, and then we all had kind of 3 Leeds players ready to go for a double. Didn't happen. So people still, speaking to that sunk cost idea, bench boosted 3 Leeds players. I think it was against Southampton.
Yeah, I was about to say Southampton were involved in that one.
They're always involved somehow in messing things up, unless you own Man United or Leicester players for 2 particular games. And the extreme example, I think, as well, that came to mind for me was last year. And so we all piss so much time away planning for everything, navigating blanks and doubles, etc. And then round 5 of the FA Cup, what happened? Spurs and Leicester were both surprisingly victims of cup sets. Leeds and West Ham lost as well. And the FA Cup, all of those fixtures suddenly became completely irrelevant, because the blank fixtures only affected teams which didn't matter to us. And the perceived optimal wildcard kind of plan was like literally game week 26, everyone wildcard in game week 26, and the rest of the season just became. I'm really sorry again to anyone who listened to me and Lucy last year, because it did get quite dark. But the end of last year did get really quite dull, because it was like everyone knew what was going to happen. There was no sort of moving around. And I kind of thought, again, I've just wasted so much time thinking about this and worrying about this, and actually kind of everything's kind of fallen into my lap. I know it doesn't always happen. I know that kind of every season's different, and that's kind of part of the luster of FPL. That's why I keep coming back. So I was saying to our mate Ben, when I was on his pod recently, but still, Sam, it kind of feels to me, I suppose, that over time, lived experience has taught me that planning, at least planning too much and planning in detail compared to kind of planning on a macro level, has more disbenefits than benefits, I suppose. I'm just putting that out there. Interested to hear what you think.
Yeah, I think you make and touch on a really good point there. I think with FPL, with generally anything in life, I like to think that the harder I work, the luckier I get. But with FPL, I think there is almost like, you can imagine a bar graph that for the first 80%, there's a pretty good correlation between working hard, planning hard, and getting a better rank, i.e. slightly luckier, or whether or not you call it skill or luck, I guess it's a mixture of both. But you become getting luckier, you get better ranks based on the harder you work. But after that first 80 or 90%, there's a real drop off in how much benefit you gain from working harder. So you might work another like 5 or 10% harder for maybe a 0.1% benefit. And another point you really touched on there, which I'd like to explore a little bit further, or reflect on rather, is the fact that planning with uncertainty in mind is a big part of FPL. And I think that's where a lot of us can get unstuck. So I mentioned working on the probabilities of double game weeks or blank game weeks coming in the next few weeks in 25, 26 and 29 in particular. You mentioned some great examples from the last few seasons where we did actually really start planning based on fixtures that hadn't actually yet occurred. So yes, it is unlikely that upsets happen in the cup, especially in some of the matches that have recently happened, but they are still possible. A game of football can go both ways, even if it is very unlikely that the minnow takes out the giant. That still can happen. So to plan based on uncertain things is always going to be fraught with some element of risk. And you should always have a sort of a plan B for if those scenarios don't happen. Now, I guess the one issue with FPL and with blank game weeks, especially around 29 in particular, is you're not just planning based on one thing going wrong, but you could have different plans based on 5 or 6 different fixtures going in one or two ways. So it just becomes a complete minefield. And I think that's where the benefit of planning is just almost non-existent. Like you say, that extra over planning is what I would probably term that as, unless you have a million different scenarios planned out to a T based on whether Shrewsbury beat Tottenham in the FA Cup quarterfinals or something. That is just not going to be of a massive benefit to you, because there's always going to be something that throws up a spanner in the works. So I think it's where those elements come in, where we're based on a lot of different uncertainties occurring, that we should be a bit more wary of how much planning we do around the game.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know. I feel like it's always been something that thinking about FPL is something that I just do as an escape. Whether it's kind of that I've got to wake up in the morning, I've got some work stuff to do, and if I'm going to bed and I'm in bed, I'll often think about, as I said on the pod a few times, like, I'll run through my team in my head, like the cool person that I am, and think about how many points I think everyone's going to score this week, and on a good level and a bad level. But yeah, I think over planning, I think we can both sort of agree is a bad thing. But I think I don't know. I've come more and more to think about. I've come more and more to the point of view that things are often so random and things are often so appended that my planning is always kind of 2-3 weeks in advance, and that's it. Like, I don't really think about it any further. And I suppose it's a good time here to bring in the resources. So there's more resources than ever before. And I feel bad calling people resources. But I mean, in effect, that's what they are to us. So Ben Crellin, James from Planet FPL, who I listen to them every week, they feasibly tell you what you could do around this time of year, which takes a lot of the cognitive load off you as an individual. And I know that sounds like a really shit cop out, but it's true. Like, it's definitely something that especially is useful to me. And maybe it's a life stage thing as well, where now I've got a kid, and my work is different to how it was when I was in my kind of late 20s. And you've also got stuff like FPL.team, which didn't exist before, where you can put your team into it and you can put quick plans together, and kind of that will sort of do. And I'm not saying that I kind of love the spoon-fed sort of stuff, but I am saying that I think it's definitely sort of, there are tools out there to kind of help you come to a decision that back in the day when I did have that sort of big document, that big spreadsheet kind of laid out, it didn't exist back then. There was sort of a lot more benefit from doing that. Now, with all of these sort of resources, it makes things a little bit different. And in the modern iteration of FPL, where effective ownership is kind of the thing that we're all aware of, that underpins kind of your joy or your despair week to week, I feel like it's a lot more heightened during the period when chips are being used, because it's a bit like kind of captaincy almost, where you've got the FOMO about not using your chips in a particular order. Yes, a lot of the time it is quite team dependent, but unless you bench boost in game week 1, you've already used your free hit at another point. Most of us probably haven't. And if you have, I'm sure that kind of becomes a different challenge for you, and that could be really cool. But most of us probably haven't. And now kind of we're in a situation where, okay, you can kind of look at a slightly more aggressive move, but the things I've done that over the last few years, and it's almost always not paid off, because yes, I've been aggressive, and kind of maybe I've had like a bit of a false position where I've kind of got a nice sort of green arrow, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm kind of, quite a bit ahead of where I should be, and then, oh, actually, it's just because I've used chip X and other people haven't yet, and then when they do, everything kind of comes home to roost effectively. And I feel like that kind of critical mass almost surrounding chip use is, again, maybe it's just the state of FPL and what FPL is as a game at the moment. But all of those things, I suppose, again, lend themselves to me to just kind of thinking, you know what, I kind of think it might be quite good to just, I've come full circle, I think, like the bell curve of time versus investment in FPL. Like I used to kind of not invest much time in it, but then kind of in the middle of kind of the period, I was investing loads of time in FPL. But now I've kind of gone to the other end. I'm out the other side, and I allocate less time to it because I've got so many ways that I can just kind of get the information in an enjoyable way and implement that myself without kind of, I guess, incurring the risk of doing something differently. I mean, maybe it's just me being lazy, and maybe it's kind of an unfashionable thing for a content creator to say in FPL terms, at least a notional one in my case. I don't really see myself as being one of those people. But I don't know. It might be something that's kind of worth giving voice to, because I feel like that's what a lot of people are doing, even though they're presenting it as being something kind of completely different, as being their own sort of idea. I suspect you will see the vast majority of people just do what everyone else does, and that can be no bad thing, because a lot of the time the chips are the most risky thing you can do in FPL, especially if you get it wrong. Like if you get it right, you do something completely different. That's great. That's amazing. You're quids in, but majority of the time, if you wildcard the wrong time, you free hit the wrong time, you triple captain, not necessarily, but bench boost at the wrong time, it can be an absolute killer, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And without trying to blow too much smoke, I think what you've become is quite an efficient FPL manager. I think you've been playing for a long time. A lot of other managers will probably be going through this, where they've been playing for 10 plus years. And whilst for a while, as you mentioned, the bell curve, you want to load up on all of the data, all of the resources you can possibly use. After a while, you know what works for you, you know what doesn't, and you know what is and isn't prudent to use your time on. And I think after 10 plus years of playing, you've probably got a quite efficient method of how to be successful in FPL. And that could involve a certain number of the tools used in a certain way to remove any sort of longer thinking. You can actually make that process very efficient for yourself. And that's not to say you're not planning. It's just you're using your time in a much more efficient manner, because like you say, you've got other things that you're doing in life. And fundamentally, we don't all have 24 hours a day to scan over all of the percentages of double game weeks and when the best time is to use our chips. There are tools available to us, and also gut is a big thing as well. Like you might think you're not planning, but if you've been playing for a long time, your gut is usually probably giving you pretty reliable information and pretty reliable data non-consciously. So again, I think there's a lot to be said for, if you've got that experience, you can probably find yourself thinking you're winging it a bit, when actually it's just all second nature to a lot of managers. So that extra planning for some of us, whilst I still find it very fun, I wouldn't want to lose that part of my game in FPL, because I think that, like, I do think it gives me a slight edge. But maybe there will come a time where in 2, 3, 4 years, after a decade of playing the game, it does almost become second instinct. It will be quite easy for me to make it a more efficient process and not have to do all of that planning. So yeah, I mean, I am obviously on the pro template side of this, but I think there is certainly an argument for the contemplate and using the resources available, using it in a more efficient way, and making FPL work for you around your life.
Maybe, but I've still got a lot to learn, Sam. If you look at the recent ranks apart from last year, it's not been great. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it kind of is chicken and egg, isn't it? Like which came first? Me trying to be effectively too clever and do my own planning, and it blowing up in my face, versus what everyone else was doing. And so this is kind of a reluctant acceptance. I just kind of do that. Like I think I was saying to Lucy at the end of last year that if I just followed what everyone else had done, then I'd have kind of probably got a top 10k finish. I didn't quite get that. I got top 20k. It's one of, I don't know, it's difficult because you're looking at a sample of kind of 1 or 2, in my case a sample of 5 or 6 of things kind of not quite working out. And it's kind of like I did well last year in spite of the chips, and the last few years I've done well, not as well because I got the chips wrong, because I didn't follow kind of, I guess, the main sort of strategy a lot of the time. So I don't know, maybe it's kind of a bit of an individual sort of blowback for me where I am, why I am where I am now. And I suppose we'll have to see kind of how it kind of develops. And I don't know, in that vein, I have absolutely no idea yet what I'm going to be doing. So you mentioned, doing potentially like free hitting in 25 and all this sort of stuff. There's a blank, there's blanks. I know there's a blank in kind of 26, and there's a big blank in 29. I think it'll be one of those where I think I'm going to be basically watching and waiting until the last possible moment before I make a decision on that. But equally, I know that, if we're looking at 25, I'm kind of quite thankful, I suppose, that City is always going to be a bit of a vexed issue. I won't have to worry about Brentford apart from maybe buying in Tony. But if Liverpool do get injected into that mix, then, as you kind of touched on earlier on, things get a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
Unless Salah, I mean, if they drew with Mozambique, last minute penalty, there's a chance I think that he could be back for game week 22 or 23, if they don't get through the group stages, which will make things a lot easier, to be honest. Although last time they came back from AFCON and they'd lost, he wasn't the same. No, he was. Let's
not open that can of worms.
No, that's not. But I think that would be amazing, really. So just make my life so much easier. So there's definitely kind of a few elements that I need to start kind of building in. But at the moment, I'm kind of very much of the opinion that yes, okay, the starting gun for many has sort of already arrived, and maybe it is about me being efficient with my time. But I do start to think that, yeah, you know what, maybe it's kind of just not quite worth it because at the end of the day, I'm only going to want to change my mind anyway after something new happens. And I know that especially happens in chip season, but I do feel like that just happens a lot in FPL too, where something has already sort of kind of kicked off, and yeah, suddenly my plans are nowhere, or I've got to do something else. I've got to keep a player I don't want for a long time. I feel like that kind of happens more often than not, a lot of the time. I don't know. Yeah, it's a really interesting discussion, that's for sure. And I think that, we need to see kind of what happens in terms of the upcoming blanks and doubles and how we're going to approach it. I think once we do have more sort of established ideas on what the fixture list is looking like, then maybe we'll have some differing approaches, and mine will still remain quite macro, quite vague, but I think there will kind of start to be a period where yes, okay, I'm presenting as a little bit more casual than perhaps I actually am, but there will be a moment where I'll kind of start to, with my transfers, make conscious choices around who I'm going to be bringing in. And I think that's kind of maybe the difference between kind of, as you put it, me as a experienced-ish manager, where in those kind of decision points, I will be looking at players for whom the upcoming kind of schedule is kind, versus buying in the player who next week has a great fixture. So this week I'd be fine buying an Alvarez, or maybe potentially buying a KDB, as we discussed a little while ago. But I think later on, as we do kind of enter chip season proper, that'll be the time where I kind of start to think a bit more about kind of, okay, when am I going to wildcard this, and how is that going to all fit together? Yeah, really interesting. Cool. All right. So bold claims are going to return next week, because, well, I've still got mine to come, I believe. So let's move on to the rest of the questions this week before we round off. Slightly shorter one this week, but yeah, hopefully kind of fits into everything. Answered a couple already. Next one. Oh gosh, more planning. FPL fell, John. When Salah and Haaland are back, Salah and Haaland, I think it's been Salah and Son are back. Should we be looking to own them both, or did the success of Narland prove that we should be owning one or the other? I haven't really thought about when I'll be bringing them back, I don't think, because again, there's more information to come about what Liverpool blank schedule looks like and all that sort of jazz. You might be able to get away with Son depending on where you put your money, especially if you own Trent at the moment. I assume that's kind of your basically your Son replacement. So quite an interesting one, Sam. Obviously, to see what happens with I think South Korea won their first fixture 3-1. Certainly see what happens with Salah over the next few days with Egypt. But he'd be the one that I'm sure we'll all be kind of thinking, bringing back, especially the game week 25 to come. Difficult to know right now, but I mean, where are you with that?
Yeah, so I think for one very good reason, that being double game week 25 for Liverpool still being a pretty decent possibility, then having both Haaland and Salah for that game week at the same time will be pretty important, or at least it feels important to me. So I think I would be rejecting that strategy based on that possibility for the time being. But that's not to say that at other times going with one or the other couldn't work. I think it's just the allure of both having a double game week, especially where if you do consider ownership in your thinking, if you don't want to leave yourself open to a big rank drop by only having one of the two, then or hedging against quite large EOs, if you only own one of the two, then I would probably be looking at having a plan to get back to both if that Liverpool double is confirmed in 25. If it's not, then obviously the strategy does become slightly more interesting in terms of you could maybe just go with Haaland, not Salah, or you could go with Salah and not Haaland if Haaland's injury is a little bit worse than we think as well. So there's definitely room for those different strategies to coexist. But I think if that double does get locked in, then it probably narrows all of our minds towards making sure that the two most explosive and probably the best FPL assets of the last few years are both in our teams for what looks like a pretty alluring double game week.
Yeah, definitely. I think the more interesting discussion to have is who do you supplement Mo with, which is probably going to be more of something that, again, judging by my style, we will kind of speak about when we arrive there. Almost definitely Trent, I'm sure, if he's back fit. And then do you get a third one? How does it work? As you said, really decent double game week on fixture, or really decent but fairly decent double game week on fixture on paper. I think that would be really interesting to see. Next question. Oh, sorry. Do you want to say?
No, I was just going to mention it. If that double is confirmed for Liverpool, it makes it really interesting what you would do if you do pile up on Liverpool. I think if you transferred into 3 Liverpool for double game week 25, they're probably going to have the blank in 26 because of the double in 25. So then all of a sudden you're looking at 3 bench players immediately for next week. And that's a lot of your budget if you are looking at Salah, Trent, and let's say Darwin, for instance. So it's whether or not you're comfortable doing that. So you might have to think about chip strategy if you want to pile in on Liverpool with transfers, or if you only go with 2 of them, then you might be able to bench them both in 26 without having to worry too much about hitting the free hit. So that's just one thing to consider with the strategy in mind, and just one thing I'm keeping my eye on in case that double does get scheduled in.
Yeah, and a blank does occur as well. Great. Chris asked the next question, and it's one that's pertinent to you, actually. What's the deal with Estepinian? Loads of people have brought him in. Quite a few transfers in last week for Estepinian. Notes that Brighton don't have the best clean sheets record out there. 1 in 19 so far, so 5% success rate. He might play left centre back too. Not sure if it's worth it. What do you guys reckon? Because loads of people seem to be buying him effectively. So you've gone there, and I suppose I don't know whether it's a kind of a it was kind of a bit more of a circumstantial thing for you, wasn't it? Because you had a player to get rid of, and you thought, well, why not? Let's kind of go with it. But yeah, he's up to kind of 26% ownership now. I know that at the start of the season he was at kind of 50%, like half the game owned, didn't he? Really early doors. And so an interesting one. He's got more than 1 million owners, 1 million more owners now. This week than last week. So yeah, quite crazy kind of in terms of the increase there. What's your view on him? And what were you hoping for? I guess still about those attacking returns.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that XGI data stays at about 0.35, which I think it is at the moment. So that's over 1 expected return every 3 games. That's not bad going. Obviously, clean sheets are at a minimum at the moment, but you'd hope that even in a pretty poor defense that they do pick that success rate up very slightly at some point. Obviously, I'm not holding out massive hope, but I think the main reason that a lot of managers are going with Estepinian right now is because there's just no one else, really. I think to get 3 defenders at the moment that you're happy with is quite tough to do. There's not a ton out there. and having the explosive players that do have attacking upside seems like a pretty good way to go. I think in my team, Pedro Porro is going nowhere for the time being. Again, he's very much like a Stupinian in the fact that I don't expect many clean sheets, but the attacking returns are decent. Trent is still in my team. I'm hoping he comes back soon. And then the other defender I'm happy to start is just having an Arsenal defender because of that good defensive data. But outside of that, you're looking at quite a dearth of options. There's not really a lot out there that I'm particularly happy with. And in my particular position, because I wanted to try to avoid selling Trent based on the information we had at the time, or even if I didn't, my other defenders were Lascelles and Taylor. So I had to make a defensive move somewhere. And he was by far, like, it wasn't even close to being the next best option. I think in the chat right now, FN has just said Walker as another option. Yes, that is not a bad option whatsoever, but I also want to leave myself open to triple Man City elsewhere. So having a defender there who has very limited and like very, very limited attacking upside. I think he did get an assist this week, but it was very rare that he does get those sort of returns. You're banking on just clean sheets, whereas there are 3 Man City options elsewhere that you could be lumping on that provide a lot more that aren't in defense. So whilst I don't necessarily hate Man City defenders, I think other than Walker, it's quite hard to tell which ones are going to be starting week in, week out. And Walker himself is very much usually with Newcastle aside, a 2 or a 6 pointer at absolute most.
Yeah, I was going to say he's a cut price Edson. He kind of still is 0.1 cheaper, but yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think the days of Cancelo being a fantastic pick for Man City are over, and the defense there is just a minefield other than Walker, who makes a lot of sense if you just want somebody who's going to start a lot. The thing is that the upcoming fixture congestion we talked about earlier on, he's getting on a bit as well. Walker seems to have been obviously given a bit of a you stay, you'll play sort of thing from Pep. But the defense this year has been singularly baffling, I think, for a lot of FPL managers. There have been obviously times when Trippier was in the zeitgeist and he was going to smash your OR if he did well, if you didn't own him. Trent recently has gone from being the forgotten man to being somebody who everyone wants to lump in on. The Arsenal defence for a little while was decent. Pedro Porro obviously came to the fore and has been kind of a bit of an auto-include for a lot of people. But you're still at in a very sort of strange situation where kind of in the top 10 for the defenders this year, just to kind of put it out there, you got Zinchenko in 5th, who I haven't seen in many teams really. You got Saliba, probably one of the highest owned defenders in FPL. But he's another 2 or 6 effectively. Yes, he got kind of a couple of attacking returns. That's about it. And you've got Mikolenko and Tarkovsky up there.
Yeah.
The same price. There's the same sort of points scored as Virgil, Van Dijk, and Zinchenko. And then you've got kind of Joachim Anderson still trading off his kind of game week 1 to 8 glories. And then you've got Alfie Doughty, of all people, friend in the top. So it's been a very difficult sort of period if you're looking at any defender anywhere to kind of fit in. And it makes a lot of sense, best opinion. I mean, just really basic maths. But he's got 13 returns over the last couple of years in FPL. He started 38 times. So that's a 34% chance of a return if he starts. That's really basic. He doesn't start every game.
The data matches that as well.
Off the top of my head. But the positioning on pitch also matches that, because you've got the amount of times you've watched Brighton and you kind of see Estepinian, like he's in the D. Like, what are you doing there, mate? I mean, if there's a counter attack, you're absolutely screwed. But
no wonder they don't keep clean sheets.
Yeah, exactly. But he's there. And also, he could play left centre back, as Chris mentioned. But we're having a chat with Joe and Josh from Always Cheating, Joe from Scout, and he mentioned that even at left centre back, he scored a goal against Stoke. Obviously, it was Wildy, but it's obviously it's in his repertoire to do that. So you've got a player who, if same principle as Porro, effectively, we don't own him for the clean sheets, and especially with Brighton, as Chris points out, you don't own them for the clean sheets. You basically own them in the hope that you're going to get an assist or you're going to get a goal. That's basically it, and it's quite an interesting sort of situation now. It harks back to the old days where in vogue basically is just if Trent wasn't fit. If Trent was fit this week, basically, I think most people's back three, the tempo back three would be Porro, Trent, Estepinian. So 3 highly attacking fullbacks. And I think that's always kind of where FPL is a little bit different, I guess, from proper football, because that's all we're really interested in the end products, and the clean sheets are a bonus, but it's always good if they do come. I don't know. I can see what the deal is, best opinion. I didn't go there this week just because I couldn't quite make it work, and transfers and captains will speak about it. But again, don't think I can quite make it work this week. But the fixtures are there, the underlying data's there. He's fit. He's a fit player. Like, he can play basically every kind of few days. I remember when he first came to the Premier League, he was interviewed about kind of playing regularly, and he said, "Yeah, it's something that I'm just used to doing. I'm used to doing that. It's absolutely fine with me. It's no problem." A very good athlete, so it makes a lot of sense to me as well to go there. And I probably would have gone there this week if I didn't kind of have like maybe not a hope, but basically I could play a double Arsenal defence, just hope for the best, and that's kind of what I've done. But yeah, no, I absolutely am on board with it. Fair play, and why not? Basically, if you're looking for a player who's in with a decent chance of returning, like if you think 30 returns and 38 starts equals 34% chance of returning, so 1 in 3 games basically there's a chance that he does do something. And that's really basic, I know, but there you go. Right, next up, Greg at GPay99. Is it time for United assets with the fixtures being okay? Is Rashford back on the menu, Sam? Well, I mean, you went there with Garnacho and you got a bit unlucky, I think. It's not to return. I don't know if you've seen the United highlights yet, but could have got an assist at the very least.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I think there's definitely distressed assets out there. I said to you last week, obviously didn't have time because you were in the airport, but I said you need to clip the bit where you said that Rashford is you've got a sneaky feeling about Rashford.
Yeah.
Returned, know what he can do. United are there, but maybe there's an argument that because it was Spurs, it was kind of an opportune game for Rashford, but I don't know. Like, the feel good maybe back. Big Sir Jim in the building. Wolves, West Ham, Villa, Luton, and Fulham next 5. And a Villa game away, obviously quite worrying in 24. But other than that, Sam, maybe there could be something there. If you do want to go there for the United assets. I don't think I want to touch their defence, to be honest, because we've spoken about that. And their attack as well, maybe, is in a bit of a false position too. But, it's always good to be grabbing these assets when they are distressed and no one's looking there, rather than when everyone is, and those points aren't as unique as they were, right? Could it be worth it?
Yeah, so let's deal with Rashford and Garnacho separately. I am gutted in a way that I didn't go back for Rashford, because that was my gut. I just had a funny feeling Rashford was about to hit a bit of a crest, and he's now returned in his last 4 games, which is a little bit frustrating because I did mention it. I mentioned it in my own video as well. And he is a player that is a bit streaky, and it looks like he's a bit sick of the chat. So maybe he's about to go on another streak with some good fixtures to come. And yeah, I'm a bit gutted I didn't go there. But with Garnacho in mind, the benefit is he does pass the eye test with flying colours at the moment. He is one of the bright sparks at United in what has otherwise been a pretty gloomy season. And most importantly of all, he's so cheap. He's under 5 million. So it does possibly enable moves elsewhere. It does mean you can get back to Haaland when he's fit. It does mean that you can pretty easily get back to Salah as well when he comes back without having to necessarily take a hit. So it is interesting that he is getting good minutes. I think he's getting 90 pretty much week in, week out now. He seems like Ten Hag's trusted guy in that front 3. And he is passing the eye test. I think he will return well over the next few. And for any player under 5 million to be getting half decent attacking returns, I think is great value for money. His data is also suggesting they will come as well. So I think whilst we've all got our own biases, whether positive or negative for United, if you set that aside and look at the players in isolation, Rashford's kind of streaky. If he goes on a bit of a run, then he can be very explosive, as we saw last year. And Garnacho is so cheap that even if it's one return in every 3 games, that's probably enough to make it worthwhile, and it enables moves elsewhere. So he's a good 7th/8th attacker to have and hold in your team for upcoming doubles, for upcoming blanks, more importantly, especially in 26 when they've got a good fixture when it might be a week where Liverpool assets blank, for instance. So he could be a free hit saver, for instance.
Yep, absolutely fine. I'm on board with Garnacho. I just like the idea of grabbing a player before other people are in on them. The only problem is the old no room at the inn sort of thing that's going on. So assuming, right, that I'm going to be in a 3-4-3, where a lot of people will kind of have ended up the old school 3-4-3, right? You've got Foden, Gordon, who I think a lot of people don't own him. I think we need to probably hold, and if you do own a Gordon, you probably need to hold, because coming up, Luton, Nottingham Forest, and Bournemouth are a nice kind of triple of fixtures. Cole Palmer, I think, stays there, done his job, and any game penalty or any game can do something. Took him a while to get into the game this weekend, just gone, but it's always there for him. And then Saka, right? So that's the 4, and yeah, there's always an opportunity therefore to go with a Rashford, go something else, and then being kind of your great differential. I don't really know how that's going to fit at the moment, because I've got Slanky and Watkins, I've got the Darwin spot, and I've got the Salah kind of thing on the bench, and maybe that could then become one of Slanky or Watkins basically then needs to become the Haaland fall guy, and I should put a question on that in a second. So where do those players fit in? What's the betting there? At the moment, I don't know. From watching the game, watching the highlights at least, they did look a little bit better, but they were playing Spurs, and that's no disrespect to Spurs. It's just how Spurs set up and how Spurs play, and it's been for even Spurs fans like James at Planet was saying that this is going to be a great game for United attackers. Is this going to be something that recurs? United have been in a bit of a loop, a cycle of resurgence, failure. As I said a few weeks ago, so the dog days of Solskjaer, and I hope that continues for a long time for obvious reasons. But also, I don't know, I haven't seen enough quite yet to make me think that that's kind of on its way. And yeah, hopefully Rashford is bored of the chat, and if it's a player I'm always going to be open-minded to. Basically, it's just probably not one I'm going to be going to just yet. But if you do have a spot for them, I think I can definitely get behind taking the punt on them effectively, because the fixtures are okay, and Rashford's the numbers aren't incredible. I'm going to say, they're not great. It's not as if he's kind of consistently putting in the underlying data, which is making me think, oh, he's just getting unlucky. It's very changeable right now. And FN said in the chat, it was really interesting to see that he got subbed out before Garnacho did. So it's still not quite there yet for Rashford for me. But yeah, I can see why there's the appeal. I can see why kind of if you want the Uber differential, he could be a great player to pick up. It's just that the price, trying to figure out everything else going forward, it doesn't quite work for me, but I can see why you go there. And yeah, I mean, Garnacho I think is a good little kind of pick up, especially if he's got that right hand slot now, which he seems to have at the moment. Penultimate question, Scott Forrest. Could Watkins out for Isaac after they play each other next week be viable? I guess how much faith do you have in Watkins, Sam? I've seen some suggestions that Watkins could be the Haaland fall guy as well, because there's been a lot of frustration with him over the last kind of few weeks. Didn't play particularly well, it should probably be said, against Everton. Had that game on, and it was the definition of a background game. There was nothing exciting really about that game. Yeah, there were a couple of moments, but wasn't that good. I mean, there's one sort of glancing header or something like that he tried, but I mean, it wasn't amazing. But I suppose the only problem I've got with Scott's question is that if you sold him the week after, yes, Newcastle have got Luton at home, but then they've got Sheffield United away, Villa. Yes, okay, yeah, we'll see because of the first game that Chris Wilder was in charge against Villa. Obviously, Watkins then blanked the week we were in captain in game week 18, so maybe could be one that you think about. But I don't know. I don't know. Is he an asset who's kind of starting to fall off a little bit for you, Sam, or is he still a player that you're going to put a lot of faith in? We've both been punished, so I think I know what your answer is going to be.
Yeah, I don't think I'm losing faith in him just yet. It is something I'm keeping an eye on because he's not scoring as freely as he was at the start of the season, but he's still gotten 20 attacking returns in just over half a season. So that's no bad return so far. I'm pretty happy with that. And if you balance that out across evenly, that it's a very good performance. So I'm trying to remain a little bit patient on a player like him for now, especially as we're not quite at the doubles and the blanks yet. So I think there will be more manoeuvring to do around then. There will possibly be opportunities to get rid of players like Watkins for doublers or to shield away from blanks, for instance, later on. But for the time being, the fixtures are still looking pretty decent, and I've got more high priority moves elsewhere for the time being. So I'm pretty comfortable holding and hoping that he does get back to his best form, basically because I've got more pressing matters to attend to first. And then when it comes to game week 25, for instance, and the doubles, then maybe I have a decision to make around then.
Yeah, that's definitely it, isn't it? I don't know. I think we've said on the pod actually a few weeks ago. If we are selling Ollie Watkins, please call us out.
Yeah,
and tell us what we're
exactly.
idiots. It's definitely, look at in terms of data, etc. He's still third for non-pen XGI this season. Villa, yeah, a bit of a blip, I suppose, against Everton. But we're in a period where all the players have been absolutely knackered for quite a while, so you can kind of excuse him potentially a little bit for that. See what happens after this kind of this break, and then make an assessment perhaps later on. Newcastle game will be interesting. 22. Both teams are going to be the beneficiaries, I suppose, of a 2-week break. See what the intensity is like. Villa very good at home. Sheffield United game, yeah, okay, can't see what happens, but I don't know whether I'd be as interested in losing Isaac for Watkins at that point, especially if Wilson's looking back fit. Need to see what happens around that. And we're going to United, going to Fulham, going to Forest, going to Luton, all good games, really, as far as Villa are concerned. And just a player, I think. I've said to you a few times, Sam, just over our kind of private WhatsApp, that I kind of feel like Haaland, Slanky, Watkins eventually is going to be just such an easy sort of trio, just to love and leave as your strikers. And just leave and kind of just play around elsewhere in your team, because at the moment that feels kind of quite good for kind of talismanic players, just to kind of hold. So at the moment, I feel like that's kind of where I'll go. I've got Darwin to play with, and I think he could be a good kind of Haaland fall guy. You're in that situation as well, but I suppose if you are in a situation where you've got Watkins and Solanke and someone on the bench you don't really fancy, maybe that'll be more of a question for you. I don't know. I think that we're definitely, our points of view is both coloured by the fact that we've sold Watkins many times at critical junctures and it's been massively punishing. So I think there's definitely going to be a bit more sort of enforced loyalty for the two of us. But I can kind of see where it comes from, I suppose, if you did want to kind of bin Watkins off. For me, I just don't really fancy it. And as we've seen by the effective ownership, I know people don't like it, but effective ownership this week, 2, over 100, basically 100%, because everyone owns him at a certain point. It's just a hygiene factor. If you lose a hygiene factor, you could become the victim of Samism, where basically you've made the mistake that other managers could benefit. So there you go. Final question this week is from Dave Seated at FPL. Wants to speak about early moves versus information, probably kind of touching on what I said about KDB a little bit. And around this period, there's been a lot of discussion on X that I've seen about making early moves and whether it's having a bit of fun or whether it's kind of just poor gameplay. He said that it's possible to have a 0.6 million swing on an early transfer, although it's unlikely, because around this period you could basically wait a lot and lose 0.3 and then lose again if you wait until the next game week and another 0.3. So he says, what's the tipping point for a single transfer? If you think a player is going to kind of gain a lot of momentum, so say you're really interested in KDB, but you know that if you wait until the next deadline, you're going to lose on 0.3 effectively. What's your tipping point on buying a player in? Are you willing to sacrifice that much money just for some information, especially given the state of how pref conferences are right now? And is it correlated to risk appetite? And what happens if you've got 2 free transfers versus 1? Which I think 2 free transfers versus 1 is a bit of a moderating factor, because you can kind of maybe take a transfer on a player. If they don't have another game to play, you just buy them because you think, oh, I've got the insurance policy, etc., etc. But I mean, I suppose I think we're probably both in the same boat here, that more information for us is always going to be paramount, especially this time of the season, right, Sam?
Yeah, I think it just depends what information you expect through the week. So in some weeks, it's probably a lot easier to go early because there aren't midweek games. There's no rumors of injury. There's no other matches being played by other teams where you've got players represented in your FPL side. So there are a lot less risks rather in your side that you have to consider, and factors that you're waiting for information on. Whereas in other weeks, there are midweek games, there's FA Cup games, there's press conferences to come. There's a ton of information that could change the landscape of FPL, a bit like what did happen last week. There was tons of information that came out very close to the deadline, one of which was around Bowen. Now, it is now possible that he does in fact play in game week 21, but again, at the time, it looked pretty bad, and a lot of people moved early before an actual match was played. So I think that is where risk appetite really comes into it. If you go early, you know that you could gain 0.3, maybe even 0.4 if the rises and the falls go your way. But for me, I think the balance of risk versus reward is slightly teetering towards not worth it for me in those situations. I think if there wasn't that midweek game, I would question how much extra information am I really holding on for? What is the benefit of me waiting? And is the benefit of me waiting versus the money I could gain from making this move early worth it? Now, I'm a fairly cautious manager. I like to do my moves fairly late because I value even quite small bits of information or low risk information bits much higher than 0.1, 0.2. But I've seen successful strategies where people go a lot earlier and hope that the information that we gain through midweek doesn't go against us. And that can also pay off. I think it is just that risk, that attitude towards risk, and whether or not you can cope with things going against you for the reward of them going your way as well.
For me, it's like once a season, once or twice a season, that's it, or I'll take a risk on that, on like making an early transfer. It's a very sort of isolated period, like a very isolated sort of individual moment where I'm at 0.0 to make a compound move, a mini wild card, -4 or whatever. And I think, yeah, if I don't get these players in now, I'm screwed. I'm never going to be able to get them again. Obviously, that went very wrong for me this year. Buying Martinelli. Let's not talk about that. Yes, it's a very isolated sort of thing for me. It's not something I do routinely. And normally, the information is going to be really important, especially now, because I kind of feel like if you were chasing team value, the time to do that was early on in the season. Now it is where it is. I mean, my team value is not great, to be honest. It's not awful, but it's not great. It's kind of around sort of 104-ish, something like that. I know there's people kind of out there wielding 106, 107, but it is what it is, and I can make that work. But I don't want to be chasing 0.1s, 0.2s, which is realistically what that is, Dave, right now, because the capacity for things to go wrong and capacity to need to start spending that team value on taking hits, some points hits, is going to be really important, because at the end of the day, at the end of the season, it's not what my team value was, which is how I judge how well my season's gone, unless you're one of these really interesting people who chases the most valuable team thing. It's the amount of points that I've got. And yes, admittedly, a lot of the last 6, 7, how long have I been doing this for? I don't even know anymore. But a lot of those have been really bad. But even though my team value has been great, that's not really been what I've been looking at. It's because the actual points have been not that great, and I so many times in my head I can think of different sort of instances where I've gone a bit early with my transfers and something's happened. It goes back to the Austin rule that we spoke about a little while back, and long-term listeners will know. I think for me that's always high in mind. Risk appetite is one thing, and the risk is always that in the next game, which is non-FPL related, that a player plays, they don't get injured. And I don't know the amount of times that has happened to me, where it's just like, oh, blah blah's down, blah blah's injured. Oh, I've just bought the guy, haven't I? And that happens so often that I just I've kind of cowered in submission, perhaps. And I don't know. A lot of the time, you can always kind of make allowances, I guess, for not quite having enough players. Like you always need to take kind of one punt, maybe. But I don't think, especially in this year's sort of pricing sort of horizon, it's not that bad. And I think you'll always kind of find a way of making it work. So it's one of those where, yeah, it's all about information for me. And that is incredibly valuable, especially around this time of year when there's different things going on between game week deadlines, also the chip season coming up. So yeah, I think I'm probably aligned with you there, Sam. All right, transfers and captains, obviously really early, and we'll go into this next week a little bit more. We spoke about captaincy a little bit already, so I don't need to rehash that. And at the moment, it's Boston Foden for me. See what happens. My default is going to be that I'm going to roll, but that is I've got no idea yet what I'm going to do. If we do, if game week 22 was here tomorrow, I'd be very tempted to roll here, Sam. I'd be looking at either Darwin out for Alvarez to double up on Man City versus Burnley and captaining Alvarez, or just rolling. My bench is absolutely appalling. I've got Taylor versus Man City as my first sub, Salah and Shemikas, who are both injured. But I'd be really tempted to roll it, 2 free transfers, and then kind of just get it done from there, because there's loads of stuff I want to do going forward. So this could be one of those precious periods where I could take a roll, hope for the best, hope I get 11 out, because the first 11, I think there's a very, very good chance they all play. So why would I not take the role? But yes, I think that depending on everything that happens going forward, we shall see. I'm very tempted by taking Darwin out for Alvarez if Haaland's not back around. I'm taking the points from that one game, hoping Alvarez gets double-digit return, because that will vindicate him coming in, finish taking hits, take him out, and I end up basically in the same position that I did last week, where I needed to remove Salah and remove Darwin for a hit to get Haaland in. So it basically elongates the same plan. So that's kind of where I am right now. What about you?
Yeah, quite similar in terms of setup. Foden is the bus captain at the moment. I have a little bit more depth than you at the moment, so I've got Garnacho first bench. That is on the proviso that Trent is fit enough to start against Chelsea. I am by no means locked in with who my first bench would be at the moment. It could easily end up being someone else, but I think the instinct was just put the 4.8 million midfielder on the bench rather than the ones on penalties or the ones that have been in my side for quite a while and have repaid the faith generally. Darwin is very much at this point just a placeholder for Haaland, but much like you, I'm looking around and there's not a ton I would do this week other than maybe a Man City player in for Burnley. So if Haaland's not fit, then Alvarez does certainly come onto the menu. I think for me, it just all depends on how beneficial having 2 free transfers over the next couple of weeks might be for me. And I need to do some planning and mapping out other priorities that might come to the fore in the next couple of weeks to see whether or not using a transfer on what will be a short-term, possibly even 1 week punt like Alvarez, what repercussions that would have on my planning moving forward, and whether that might, in fact, even lock me into a hit further down the line or make things more difficult for myself at that point. If so, then I might just leave it. I might just roll, get the 2 free transfers, and hope that Trent starts. But if not, again, it's not the end of the world, because Garnacho coming off the bench is no bad thing at all, or whoever else I've got on the bench at that point. Like I said, not locked in there. Even Archer against Crystal Palace away isn't the worst case scenario as a second bench either. So if loads of random stuff happens and I end up with playing both of them, again, it's not not necessarily the end of the world. So yeah, I'm pretty happy to roll potentially. Obviously, if Haaland's fit, bring him in 100%. That's sorted. And if not, then Alvarez versus rolling is probably the discussion for me too.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, I think that's everything this week.
Yeah, it is by the looks of it. So just under an hour and a half. So thank you so much if you've stuck with us for that 90 minutes. And if you are watching along live, it would be really greatly appreciated if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you all for listening. We have been Who Got the Assist. On X, you can find us at WGTA_FPL. You can find myself at FPL Pricey, and again on Instagram and Threads, you can find the main account at WGTA.FPL, and again, I'm just FPL Pricey on there. If you did enjoy the pod and you're not listening along live, like I mentioned, then if you could give us a follow on those socials and also give the pod a 5-star rating on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you're listening after the live stream, that would be absolutely fantastic. Like I said, all of these things really do help us with the pod, so thank you so much in advance.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. We'll be back next Sunday rather than Monday, as I'm on FPL Juice next Tuesday evening, so I need to find the time around that with family, all that kind of thing. But we hope you enjoyed the pods. We hope you think about planning a little bit and where you landed in the discussion. We'll speak next week. I think it will be kind of at the end of the game week. And then after that, we'll make a plan really for how we're going to do things, because you've always got the gnarly sort of Tuesday sort of thing going on. Don't know if we'll have another one in between. I very much doubt it. I think we'll kind of just take it as read. Thanks for listening, and we'll speak to you very soon.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?